What's up? Welcome to Journey into Self. This is your host, Sarah. I recently just celebrated my solar return, which was on July 1st, and I took a trip to Puerto Vallarta. As I was contemplating what I would discuss on the show, I reflected upon my trip, and as you know, the show is called Journey into Self. And it occurred to me that that was essentially what I did on my trip. So I thought that I would share that, and I thought that the the process that I went through, the things that I contemplated on, would be beneficial for those who are on their own spiritual journey. So I thought I'd share on that. So when I was planning the trip, I was at a place where I just felt like I wanted to go somewhere and just really get away, relax. Work had become pretty hectic, so my birthday comes right at mid-year, which is a perfect time to just be able to get away and recharge. So I started making the plans to go, and I spoke to my brother and shared with him what I was planning and invited him. But it turned out that he was unable to make it, so I ended up going by myself, which was my initial plan. But I know that all things occur according to divine order. There's no chance, coincidence, or accident, as George Clinton says in the song Good Thoughts, Bad Thoughts by Funkadelic. So things worked out the way they were supposed to be. It was destined for me to go by myself. And that has been a bit of a tradition for me for the past probably 5 years now, to just go take a trip by myself. So I got there, and just, and I'll just rewind for a minute, about going by myself. Because a lot of times people feel compelled to bring someone on a trip somewhere. But I decided that I would go by myself. And that's part of the contemplation, so I made that decision. In just spending the time just going within myself, being with myself, just being. So upon my arrival there, I sat and contemplated what I would do for the week that I was planning to spend there in Puerto Vaallart. And the first thoughts that came to mind were things like going out into town, exploring, finding out what activities might be around, visiting some other entertainment spots, maybe even engage in some tourist activities. And then when I reflected upon those things, it occurred to me, I asked the question as to why I even thought about those things. And I came to the realization that all of those things that went across my mind were things that were suggested to me that I do, things that were suggested by friends, family, people at the airport. It's things that I should do, or some of them would even say you have to do that when you go there, and bring back pictures to show people. So as I reflected upon that, I realized that none of those things were things that I wanted to do. And if I did them, it would be doing them because someone else suggested that I should do them. And if I were to go and document all the things that I did, then it would just be really an ego motivated thing to do to show others and document how I had such a good time and visited all these places. But when it really came down to it, I didn't really want to do any of those things. So I didn't. And, the lesson in that is, many times we don't engage in that type of contemplation as to making a decision about what we're going to do or not do. And if we're about to go do something, we don't ask ourselves why. How would this benefit me? How would this contribute to the objectives I want to achieve in life? If I'm on a spiritual journey, how would they contribute to my expansion? How would it contribute to my spiritual growth and knowledge of myself? Would it serve as a distraction? Or would it benefit me? We just typically just go through life without awareness of what we're doing or why. We just often act on autopilot, doing what we've been programmed to do. So I thought that I would refrain from doing that and make an objective to be present, to make decisions, make choices about what I was going to do at any given moment, and be satisfied with the choices that I make, and take ownership of those choices, and recognizing that they were mine, and then, reflecting upon, even what would be the motivation for me to do those things. Were they fulfilling? Would they be something that would bring some type of enjoyment? Would it be something that um, it could create an attachment? Would I be able to recognize that if it did bring me some type of enjoyment, would I recognize that whatever enjoyment that I gained from it was only temporary? So would I be able to act with awareness? Would I be able to be present and just appreciate every moment? So I made a deliberate decision to not do things that I felt like I had to do, or others felt like I had to do. And I spent a lot of time uh, in contemplation. I did make it a point to work out, and the rationale for my workouts were uh, that I had long observed that as an athlete, I still consider myself to be an athlete. I grew up playing baseball, and had aspirations of being a professional baseball player. Um, Made it as far as the Angels Rookie League. And, as an athlete, I found myself to be often um, frustrated with seeing some athletes who would come into camp in their respective sports out of shape. And that would incense me, because I felt like if I were in that position as a professional athlete, that I would be, I'm paid to be in shape. And so I always felt like if I were in that position and had that kind of time, that I would devote at least 3 hours a day to the gym. So in my reflections and contemplations about what I was going to do, uh, I reflected upon that um, perspective that I had about athletes. So I said, well, Sarah, I have the time. So I'm like, okay. So I did work out 3 hours a day because I had the time. And I didn't have to do anything else. I didn't have any pressure to do anything other than what I felt like I wanted to do, which is a benefit being by myself. So that was one thing I did. The other thing that I did was, of course, I had to go and spend time at the beach, but whenever I went to the beach, I brought with me a spiritual book to read. So I would be at the beach and just take in the peace and tranquility of being at the beach, and even just taking in the peace and tranquility of being at the beach. It was kind of being in a bit of a meditative type of state. And so I read this book entitled Amrita Stockholm, which is described as a Vedantic inquiry into supreme devotion. And to give a bit of a synopsis of what Vedanta represents, is really an inquiry into who we are, which I think it was appropriate for my trip, particularly as I decided that I would just spend time with myself, engaged in some introspection. And so reading that book was in divine order, as it will, and helped to, facilitate that, process of being able to go within and contemplate things and evaluate the rationale behind decisions that I would make, choices that I would make, contemplating choices that I will be making about things that I do going forward upon my return. What I do, what will I do, to fulfill what it is that I feel like I came here to do. And we all have a common journey, and then we all have our individual journeys. The common journey that we have, of course, is to attain reunion with spirit, to find our way back to our origin. And that is the objective of all religious and spiritual teachings, despite what you may have been told or come to believe about the purpose of religion and spirituality. That is, and has always been, the purpose. Whether or not it has been used in that capacity is a different story. But that is the original purpose of it. And so, I would encourage anyone to set aside judgments and to engage in study and continue to keep an open mind to find truth, realizing that truth comes in layers, and to not become arrogant ever by deluding oneself into thinking that we know. Maintaining humility, knowing that there's always more to be revealed to us. So I began reading the book in Rita Stockholm, and each passage that I read, I reflected on and contemplated how I would incorporate these understandings that I gained from reading the book into my life. Okay, and so one of the things that it talks about is, the perspective of someone who is established in supreme truth. That term in the Hindu tradition is Atma Yanini, a knower of the self. That could also be, translated into English, an enlightened person, someone who has attained enlightenment, attaining true illumination, self-realization. And so they talk about the different qualities of someone who has attained that level of consciousness. And so as I have the book now, and I just open it, and one of the things is, having a sense of, or not having a sense of mind, not having a sense of possessiveness. And so what does that mean? So when we attain to the level of where we transcend our identification with our ego self, we transcend our identification with our body, with our mind, with our senses, with our habits, desires, likes and dislikes. When we move all those layers and transcend our mind, remove all those layers through engaging in practices that help us to remove those illusions that veil us from experiencing oneness with spirit, then we perceive no separation between us and anything that exists within the universe. We become one with it. And so when we've become one with all that is, and realizing that we are that, then there is nothing to possess. There's no need for the sense of mind or possession. We don't see ourselves as separate from anything. We also become desireless. We transcend the perspective of having likes and dislikes, that we can be at peace regardless of whether we have something or don't have it. We're at peace, tranquil, we're happy, regardless of where we are. We're at peace, tranquil, and happy, regardless of what might be going on around us. We're at peace, tranquil, and happy, regardless of what other people may be saying or doing. We're at peace, tranquil, and happy by just being, because we are that. And so then our happiness is not contingent upon something that we have or don't have. Which is part of the reason why I decided to go by myself. To just experience just being with myself and being content and happy. Period. Not because of I'm with someone or not even because of where I am or what I'm doing. Just being. Is not to say that I think that I've attained enlightenment. I have not yet. I hope to. But that's the part of the process that we go through in our journey in order to get there, to be able to let go of the illusion that something outside of us is going to bring us happiness. that we need to have something or to achieve something in order to be able to attain happiness. To not have our happiness be tied to anything. That we can just be that. That we are that. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't have things. That we can't appreciate things. But to recognize that things are transitory, they're impermanent, and to learn to be able to be detached from them in such a way that we can appreciate them, but we're not emotionally tied to them, such that if and when it goes away, we're not affected by it. That we're detached, that we're at peace, that our happiness is not contingent upon the existence or non-existence of something physically in our lives. Because all that we're experiencing here truly is an illusion, but it is meant for us to engage in it. And we all have a part to play in our experience. And that is for us to find what it is that we are to contribute to this experience. That's part of the journey of self, is to identify, find, and fulfill our purpose here, fulfill our dharma. But then also to realize that the primary part of our journey is to attain oneness with spirit. And so that the things that we pursue should be in alignment with the ultimate objective of attaining oneness. And so the contributions that we make to society, the things that we seek for fulfillment, should be things that are in alignment and help to feed our ascension to oneness, as opposed to things that would derail us and distract us from attaining to that goal. Which then brings me back to part of my decision as to not engage in the things that people were telling me that I should do. And as I contemplated them, I did realize that, yeah, they may be enjoyable, but would they contribute to my spiritual ascension? Would they distract me? Would they be a detour? And some of the things that were suggested, some of the things that even were brought to my mind were things that, if I had done them, could distract or even derail me or detour me from that. And there's a lesson there as well. The mindfulness, the awareness of thoughts. And so that was one of the things that, I made it a point to do, was to exercise as much awareness as possible, such that I would be able to censor thoughts and to make that judgment as to, okay, where, if I allow this thought to stay in my consciousness, where would it lead me? And if I allowed it to resonate there, what would it serve me? What type of action would it lead to? And if I engaged in that action, what would be the result? Would that be something that would facilitate my spiritual growth, be a distraction, or would it be just something that I can just enjoy, but realize that it's not a source of happiness, but something that I can just enjoy, but not let it become a desire in such a way that it would control me. So I was there, after all, for my birthday. So I did want to, enjoy that experience and fun. But then, fun is relative. So I did have an enjoyable meal. I enjoyed the lobster, but I also had to make a choice to realize too that overindulgence there, could also be a distraction, because that would, overindulgence could then result in desire, could derail me from other goals, right? And so, even as so even as I experienced some of those things, I made a point to do it, with awareness. Again, not that I was perfect, and didn't have lapses in awareness, but that was a focus to maintain as much as possible, and and then notice, if I did have a lapse of awareness, and that would, if I got derailed a little bit, that with the awareness, I would just bring myself back to focus. And that's part of what's important that we do, is to, is to maintain awareness. So one of the things, the other quality is the Atmayanani, is to just be free from attachment. So it's what I mentioned a little earlier, to maintain, to be detached or free from attachment, which is the same thing. Detachment is free from attachment, is the ability to remain emotionally non-reactive when confronted with the poles of human experience. And so that's, having equanimity or being unaffected one way or the other, whether we're being treated with friendship, treated lovingly, or someone's spewing hatred towards us, we were being praised or ridiculed, that one way or the other is not causing us elation or causing us sadness. That we are unaffected by those things. That's what Nayanani is. One who is at peace despite what other people are saying about them or the actions that they're engaging in. That is something that we can do. People will say, well, and have said to me, Sarah, well, that's easier said than done. Of course it is. But that's the case for everything in life. We can do it, but it takes practice. And so it's the same principle as beginning a workout regimen at the gym. When we begin the workout regimen, we may start out with a particular exercise, and when we begin, it's not easy. And if it is, it's not going to really help us. So if we're looking to get stronger or develop some type of stamina, then it's important that we practice and do the workout and do it repetitively to where we develop stamina and or strength to where ultimately it becomes easier for us to do. And the more we practice at it, the more proficient that we come to where we increase in our level of competency till we get to the point that we don't have to think about it, that it becomes part of us. And so those are the 4 levels of competency. First level of competency is unconscious incompetence. We don't know, but we don't know. And so we're not aware of something. We're not aware of its benefits. We're not conscious of it. And so we learn about it. Like, say, learning as a child, we get taught to tie our shoe. We didn't know that was a thing to do. And so our parent begins to teach us to tie our shoe. So now we've moved from the stage of unconscious incompetence. Now we know that tying the shoe is a thing, and then we move into conscious incompetence. Well, I know that tying the shoe is a thing, but I know I don't know how to do it. So I'm consciously incompetent now. But then our parent begins teaching us how to tie our shoe, shows us to where we begin to practice it. And so we start doing so, but we have to remember, we have to think about all the process that we have to go through in order to be able to tie it. That stage of competence is conscious competence. We can do it now, but we have to think about it. But then the more proficient that we get at doing it through practice, we ultimately get to the point where we can do it without thinking about it. Like now, we can all tie our shoes. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to think about where the strings go or the laces go when we tie our shoes. We just do it. That's unconscious competence. And we can do that with anything. We can do that with spirituality. We can do that with controlling our mind. We can do that with learning to not react. We can do that with controlling our thoughts. We can do that with controlling our emotions. And that is something for us to learn. We can learn to be able to detach from thoughts. But we have to practice it to where we can become unconsciously competent at it. And that's part of even the process that we go through when we begin to engage in spiritual practices. And the spiritual practices are designed to get us to the state where we have control over ourselves, that we have control over our emotions, that we have control over our thoughts, that we have control over our senses. And so we learn, through our study about what the qualities are. And then we move into learning the practices as to how we can get to that level of attainment. So part of our spiritual journey is both learning knowledge, but then experiencing it through practice. So it's one thing to be able to talk about it, it's another to be able to do it. And so we want to be able to do both. In fact, we want to be able to become a living embodiment of it, to where it's apparent that that's what is manifesting in our lives, that that's where we are. That we just unconsciously engage in spiritual practices. And so I'm contemplating on these things while I was away. Another one, one who is devoid of desires. right? And that's where I was, alluding to, even, as I expressed that, I partook of a good, enjoyable meal. I had to also do that with awareness in such a way that the enjoyment of the meal did not become a desire that would that could have the effect of controlling me to where it becomes an attachment that I seek to find fulfillment from, that it becomes something that I'm looking for to attain happiness and satisfaction outside of myself. Okay? The desire to find happiness outside of oneself or fulfillment outside of oneself is an attachment which will ultimately lead to desire, which will ultimately lead into frustration and anger, because we're not always going to be able to have that. So we want to attain to the level of being able to be at peace and contentment, regardless of being able to have any of those things. And so I spent all that week, reading and contemplating those things, and evaluating how I would be able to experience those things, how I'd be able to put those things into practice in my life. And as things unfolded, of course, I did my own daily meditation even while I was there. But I also knew that in order to be able to obtain the objectives that I wanted, to be able to develop the qualities that I was reading about, that I would need to even further deepen my practice. Just as it was that like I had made the commitment to get in better shape, so I worked out for 3 hours. It's the same principle that holds, with our spiritual development. In order to be able to get in shape physically, we have to put in the work. We have to practice. And the same holds true with spirituality. We have to engage in the practices that are designed to be able to help us in our quest of self-mastery. So, as it turned out, all is in divine order. Upon my return, I was made aware that a seminar was being held that very weekend that I returned. In fact, that very day that I returned, wherein I could be introduced and initiated into a spiritual practice that I had been desiring to learn for some time. And that desire was spurred by having read the book autobiography of a yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, and it turns out that the practice was something that had been passed down to him uh, by his master, spiritual master Sri Yukteswar, and that he was one who brought the practice of Kriya Yoga to the United States. And, I'd always had desired to be able to be initiated into uh, the practice from that lineage. And that's basically what the opportunity that was presented to me upon my return, which then provided me the practice that I needed to be able to realize the goals that I developed from reading the books and contemplating on those things, and how I would be able to incorporate those into my life. I was given that opportunity to be initiated into that practice, which I did do, and and so then it's for me to incorporate that into my spiritual practice, which is what I'm doing. So there is to realize that all is in divine order, and that that which we focus on will manifest itself in our lives, which is also important to be mindful of what it is that we focus on, because we will get just that. Whether we like it or not. So that's why having awareness, mindfulness is important, because we will attract based upon what it is that we allow ourselves to focus on, whether intentionally or unintentionally. That's what will happen. So I wanted to share that, because that was my experience, and I found that it's beneficial to be able to share spiritual experiences, because it's one thing to read about things, and a lot of times when we read it, it's it seems a bit abstract. It's like it seems beyond our grasp, but it's always different to be able to hear someone relate their own experience, and it makes it more tangible when we do hear that, and are able to hear someone express their own journey and their experience. And sometimes those things can be an inspiration to us. And so I've always made it a point to whatever even those who follow me on Facebook and take notice of the posts that I do. My motivation behind doing it was just realizing the benefit that the insights that I would get from my own spiritual study, or insights that I would gain from my own spiritual practice, could benefit someone else. And and it's not, we're not here alone. I'm not here alone, even though I enjoy being alone. Um, but I'm not here just for me. So that's part of what that's my dharma. That's part of what I'm supposed to do, is to be able to share and be able to do whatever I can to help people on their journey. So I hope this has been beneficial to you on your journey into yourself. And if I can be of assistance to further assistance to you on your journey, do feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on Facebook on Brother Sarah. And you can also contact me through my website, which is www.sa-ra.org. That's www.sa-ra.org. Or you could reach me by email, which is my website, sa-ra.org. Sarah at, and that's sa-ra at sa-ra.org. Okay, so then also please do avail yourself of my books, the Book of Light and Luminous Wisdom, which you can find on Amazon. Just type in Sarah's Book of Light and you will find them both. All right, so with that, I will greet you in the Kemetic words of peace, and we'll see you next time on Journey in the Self. What's up?